everyone, how's it going? So, in the last video, I tried to beat Pokemon Red and Blue with as few battles as possible. And for the definition of battle, I did talk about it in the last video, but essentially, no extra trainer battles, and the only thing we can do with wild Pokemon is run away. Anytime we do anything else like catching it, counts as a battle. There are going to be no items used in battle. You can use items outside of battle. There was some confusion there, but we need HMs and the Pokeflute to get through the game, so yeah, that's allowed. Another thing is that we are not going to be using the daycare to level up Pokemon, would nullify any challenge this run would have, so keep that in mind. And we're not going to use glitches. And with all those restrictions, it was still possible to get through the game, albeit in the last video it wasn't the most elegant strategy. There were some cool moves that I used, and I was proud of it to a degree, but especially the Agatha fight, really, it just left a sour taste in my mouth. I knew there must be a better way. So as soon as I completed the run, I got back to thinking, and I ended up pretty quickly figuring out a much better route through the game that doesn't change the number of battles, those will stay the same, but makes it way more consistent, and that's what we're doing in this video. Now, the new route, it is much improved, but it only is able to take effect in the second half of the run. So, in theory, the first half of the run would be unchanged, but there are a couple of things that I did decide to do a little differently. One of which you guys pointed out, which was really smart, and I'm really mad I didn't pick this up, but there was a fight that was just horribly inconsistent in the first half of the run, Rival 2. Remember, Rival 2, and this is a constant problem for me in these runs, Pidgeotto loves to use Sand Attack, and if you only use a single Pokemon, it's really luck-based how many Sand Attacks he uses, and whether you hit your attacks or miss them. It's basically like a 10 to 20% chance anytime you fight him, even using optimal strategy, that you'll win. Thankfully, there is a Pokemon that we can use that makes the rival a complete joke. I'm not kidding, and I can't believe I didn't think of this because the Pokemon is Magikarp, and I'm not being sarcastic. Magikarp, specifically the one bought in the Pokemon Center before Mount Moon, just completely nullifies the Sand Attack element, and here's what the new and improved rival fight looks like. So for the Pidgeotto, I actually start with a Leech Seed now, and then just keep going for Tackle. There's really no point. You can use Growl, but I just want to get the Pidgeotto out of the battle as soon as I possibly can, and I have sometimes lost quite a bit of health, but that's not a problem at all. Even if it uses a bunch of Sand Attacks, that's not a problem at all, because the next Pokemon is Abra, which can't attack. And so what you'll do with the Abra, depending on your health, is you'll just need to hit one Leech Seed. And even if your accuracy is pretty low, the odds of you missing 9 Leech Seeds in a row is pretty low. It's like astronomically low. So you're going to hit one, and then you just keep using either Tackle or Growl. I mean, if your accuracy is pretty high and you want more health, I would advise using Growl. And you can gain back most of, if not all your health, depending on how careful you want to be. After the Abra faints, then you can swap in your Magikarp. Make sure not to swap in the Magikarp during the Abra part, because then it'll gain some experience points, and that actually screws up a later fight. So you're going to need to make sure to swap in Magikarp after the Abra faints. The Rattata will take it out in a single hit, and then you just spam Vine Whip on the Rattata, and Tackles, thankfully, it doesn't have the good AI, so it's just going to use random attacks to Charmander. Even if it uses Ember, you're over-leveled at this point, so you'll be fine. And the fight goes from one you win like 10% of the time, to one you win about 95% of the time. It's really, really nice. The other fight that is different, unsurprisingly, is the third rival fight, the one on the SS Anne. Once again, to remove the luck element of the Sand Attacks, you can swap in Magikarp, this time after the Pidgeotto faints, because the next Pokemon is Raticate. But unlike Rival 2, the biggest lucky component in this fight is actually what moves Kadabra will use. Kadabra has 2 moves, Confusion and Teleport, and it's essentially a 50-50 split which move it will use. You needed to use Teleport, There are some situations where if it uses a confusion, you can be fine, but pretty much always, if it uses confusion, that's a reset. Unfortunately, there's no way we can directly manipulate what move it uses. All we can do is try to ensure it attacks us as least as possible, because the Kadabra can attack anywhere from a single time to 3 times, and obviously we only want it to attack 1. The way we ensure it only attacks 1, because we can't just level up our Ivysaur, which is what I'd usually do, we have to actually start thinking about DVs, or determinate values, the hidden numbers assigned to each Pokemon's individual statistics that help determine through a formula whether those stats will be a little better or worse than other Pokemon in the species. Now, there is an exact DV that you need, but unfortunately it's not easy to A, manipulate what DVs your Pokemon gets since it is random, and B, it's actually really difficult to check, especially at low levels, exactly what your DVs are. So essentially what I did is I would just reset. I knew that 11 was the highest it could have in speed and attack, and I prioritized speed. So if I saw 11 in speed and the other stats looked okay, I would just continue on with that Bulbasaur. But I did reset several times, and it is luck. It's basically 1 in 16 chance, essentially, that you get a perfect speed Bulbasaur. You don't need perfect speed, but it's just what I did. Again, if you have more questions, I might post something in the description or I'll answer it in the comments, but it's really math-y and kind of takes away from a lot of the fun, but it is necessary and helps make this fight really consistent. And I'll show you what a normal fight will look like. About 80% of the time, this is what's going to happen. Basically, the Pidgeotto, just spam Tackle. If you get hit with Sand Attack, swap to Magikarp. If not, spam Vine Whip. Then spam Tackle against the Kadabra. Hopefully, it doesn't use Confusion. If it does, and you have about 40 or so health, you can try using Bide and hope for a 2-turn Bide. Bide can either be 2 or 3 turns in this game, and that will take out the Charmeleon. You do want extra health, so in this case, I did get a 3-turn Bide. In fact, both my videos, that's what happened, and thus the extra health is really helpful. Either way, normally without getting an unlucky crit or something, you'll get past this fight, and this fight used to take me about half an hour to get through. It now takes me about 2 to 5 minutes, so that's pretty nice. Anyway, the last change is actually right after this, because normally what I do after I get cut is go right to Lieutenant Surge and face him, but I'm actually going to skip Lieutenant Surge for now. We're going to save him for later, and I'll explain why very shortly. But we're going to make our way through Rock Tunnel into Celadon City, and this is where the run will change. And in fact, if you notice, I'm again playing on red version. I did want to use blue just to get a different color scheme, but because of the strategy I'm using, red version is better. Now, funny enough, I got so many helpful suggestions. I had already completed my first run before I posted the last video, but it was really cool to see you guys thinking outside the box, trying to solve the problem of Agatha and all the other difficult fights. A lot of you guys already predicted that I'd use the Magikarp, which was really smart, but what I was surprised is not a single person, to my knowledge, actually guessed what I'm going to do here. What many of you thought I was going to do is get the coin case, collect some coins, and purchase an Abra. Well, that's right, I am going to do that, but we're not actually going to use the Abra at all. Instead, we're going to take that Abra, go to Vermilion City, and now you guys are figuring it out. We're going to go through Diglett Cave and go to this house where there's a trainer who will take my Abra and give me a Mr. Mime. And we are going to be playing the rest of this game pretty much entirely using Mr. Mime. Now, why not use Kadabra? Why Mr. Mime? There are actually a couple reasons for this. The first is Mr. Mime's better move pool. Mr. Mime gets access to Thunderbolt, which we're going to be using, and that makes it a better Pokemon than Kadabra, which really doesn't get another decent special move to use, and you pretty much have to rely on using Psychic throughout the entire rest of the game, even against Psychic Pokemon. But most importantly, Mr. Mime is a traded Pokemon, and traded Pokemon gain experience 50% more than non-traded Pokemon. And since we're already kind of behind the 8 ball here, we're getting a level 9 Pokemon way into the game where the Pokemon we're going to be facing are in the levels of 20 and higher, we need it to gain experience points really quickly. And for all these reasons, Mr. Mime is superior to Kadabra. Kadabra will work, by the way. I did this in a different version, Japanese Blue, and you have to use Kadabra because you can't get Mr. Mime, and it works not as well, but it works. But the Mr. Mime strategy is just way better. So now that we have Mr. Mime, we're going to teach it some useful moves. Well, one useful move, Psychic. Thankfully, as soon as you get to Celadon, you can get the fresh water, and you can go to Saffron and get the TM for Psychic, the most powerful Psychic move in the game, for free. That's great. There's so many things that make Mr. Mime just great for this. And by the way, as many of you pointed out, Psychic Pokemon are insanely overpowered in Generation 1, so using a Psychic Pokemon was always a good idea. The reason I was skeptical, and don't worry, we are going to solve this problem, is the Mr. Mime is very underleveled. In fact, if you use Blue version, it would only be at level 6. And we want it to battle on its own as much as possible. We don't want to have to switch in and out. So I did have a whole strategy of dealing with this. In fact, my first run I even used Blue version, and it was kind of luck-based and I didn't love it. But then I realized I actually didn't skip Lieutenant Surge in that run. I was just in autopilot and fought him. So I'm like, oh great, I have this whole strategy and it all works out without fighting Lieutenant Surge. Why don't I just fight him and use Mr. Mime? And in fact, Lieutenant Surge is so easy, my terrible Mr. Mime actually will work here. So he leads off with Voltorb, and Voltorb's only two attacking moves are Tackle, which doesn't do a lot of damage, and Sonic Boom, which will do exactly 20 and misses a lot. Now, if he uses a couple Screeches and a Tackle, it will feint Mr. Mime, but if you just keep spamming Psychic and hope he uses either Sonic Boom a couple times, which can miss, or Screech, which Voltorb seems to love using Screech, you can actually take out the Voltorb using just Mr. Mime. If you don't, it's not a problem. You can try for the Pikachu. I did take it out in this run, and then I swapped into Ivysaur to take out the Pikachu. Then I swapped into Magikarp when the Raichu came out, simply because I want to swap back in Mr. Mime, but a single attack from Raichu, no matter what it is, if it's an attacking move, will feint my Mr. Mime at this point. And after the Magikarp obviously faints, swap back in Mr. Mime, and then use Ivysaur to finish off the Raichu, and lo and behold, our Mr. Mime is already at level 12. The next thing we're going to do is head back to Celadon City into the Rocket Game Corner, and we're going to fight the Poster Rocket. Now, I'm going to lead off with Eevee, which we're still going to use, and the idea is for Eevee to use Tackle. It is going to faint quickly, but get in enough tackles that Mr. Mime will be able to take out the Raticate with a single Psychic. It will not faint to one attack from the Raticate, two will take it out. Unfortunately, I just missed and I had to use a second Psychic, but it worked, so that's great. Then the Zubat, it's a range. The Zubat can hit you with a Supersonic or a Leech Life, which isn't great. Thankfully, I got a critical hit after getting confused, and I took out the Zubat. Honestly, I don't believe you actually need the full experience points from the Zubat. It's not the end of the world, but regardless, it can be done with just Mr. Mime, and we are ready to proceed through Rocket Hideout. Now, our first fight here is going to be with the guy who gives you the lift key or drops it. He uses a Coughing and a Zubat. The Coughing will take 2 hits, but doesn't deal enough damage to be a problem. Even though we're at such a low level, the Zubat should faint in a single hit. And we're now at level 16. After making your way down to the 4th floor, you're going to fight the 2 Rockets, and you need to fight the one on the right first, the one with the Ekans, Sandshrew, and Arbok. Now this fight can go badly in 2 ways. The Ekans will faint with a single Psychic, but the Sandshrew takes 2. If it uses Slash and it's a critical hit, it's a 1-hit KO. And the Arbok, depending on various things, will outspeed you. You can buy some Carbos and try and outspeed it or use a rare candy, but I think that's really just unnecessary and not very strategic. The Arbok has such bad AI, and it doesn't do much damage. Even a critical hit with Bite didn't take me out. So I just spam Psychic and hope for the best, and usually, like 70-80% of the time, I've done this run a few times, this is a pretty easy fight. But I talk about it since it is kind of crucial to get these experience points. Next comes up the guy on the left with the Sandshrew, Ekans, and Sandslash. But since we're gaining levels so quickly, things have changed. The Sandshrew is usually a 2-hit KO, but Mr. Mime will critical hit about 1 in every 5 attacks, so I got one here. Ekans is always a 1-hit KO. And the Sandslash, you can see even a critical hit with Slash, I didn't faint. So these levels are crucial, and a second Psychic takes out the Sandslash, and we're almost ready to fight Giovanni, but I do two things. One, I spend all the money I have on some calciums, so I get a little bit more special. This will help. And then I go to Erica's gym and fight the Beauty with the Execute. Even though it's not very effective, you can see how strong Mr. Mime is. I'm still doing quite a bit of damage. It only really has Barrage, so it's not a problem at all. And that'll get me to level 21. And at 21, it's just a little bit easier to face Giovanni. On that note, people ask me what's the difference between this and a speedrun. Here is a clear case of a big difference. I'm not optimizing this for speed. You can see how much back and forth this is. There is a much more efficient route that might even work if you got the right luck, which would make it an awful speedrun, but I prioritize consistency and making these fights as strategic as possible versus hoping I get the perfect random numbers and then just winning like that. So I thought I'd bring that up. Anyway, on to Giovanni. The Onyx will faint in a single Psychic. Rhyhorn does take 2, and you can see Horn Attack doesn't do too much damage. Now, Kangaskhan can be a problem. If it uses Comet Punch and gets a crit, it can do a lot of damage. If it uses Rage, that's the best case. I did get a crit against me, but I was able to get off that second Psychic, and down went the Kangaskhan, and we have gotten through probably the hardest part of the run. I am not kidding. Getting past Giovanni is actually really difficult because just so many things can go wrong, and you're dealing with such slim margins. But now that we're nearing kind of not being underleveled, the fights are going to go a lot easier the rest of the way, and thus my play-by-plays are going to get a whole lot quicker. After we beat Giovanni, we can go to Erica, but we're not going to outspeed either Victory Bell or Vileplume, so it's better just to go and fight the rival. And you might think the rival would be really difficult. He's not. He's actually a complete joke, and you're not going to believe just how easy this fight is. I have already taught Mr. Mime Thunderbolt, and when it leveled up, I taught it Light Screen. Both these will come into play later, but Thunderbolt, right now, I'm going to use it twice against the Pidgeotto. The AI is terrible. Sometimes it just spams Whirlwind. It doesn't matter if it attacks you, because Execute knows Barrage and Hypnosis. Hypnosis just stalls, and Barrage does, like, nothing. And you can even teach your Mr. Mime Reflect, and it will do less than nothing. Like, it's really not a problem. Just use a few Psychics. Then comes out the Gyarados, single Thunderbolt. Then the Kadabra, I misclicked. I meant to use Thunderbolt, I used Psychic. It actually confused me. What I should have done is swapped out and swapped back in. I didn't feel like it. I just was like, whatever, let's just be reckless. So I just used a Thunderbolt, it fainted. I had like no health, so this fight shouldn't have been a victory. But Charmeleon, when it came out, decided to use Growl. It is a 2-hit KO, but hey, it chose to use Growl for some reason, and yeah, that was the fight. To be fair, I've done this run several times, and I know how easy this fight is, which is why I wasn't overly concerned. This was definitely the sloppiest one I have, so it's kind of ironic it's going to make the video, but whatever. Anyway, you proceed to go through the Pokemon Tower, but you shouldn't go all the way to the top, and the reason being, traded Pokemon will stop obeying you if you don't have the right badge, and Erica's badge will take that level cap from 30 to 50, so we can't have Mr. Mime get above level 30. I decided to go up to the Marowak. You actually can fight the first rocket, I think, but what's the point? I then decided to backtrack, go back to Celadon and fight Erica, and at this level, she's just a joke. You use Psychic a bunch of times. She will hit you with a Petal Dance with Vileplume sometimes if you don't get a crit, and it does like nothing, and there you go. Erica, she was the hardest fight in the Magikarp run, which pretty much ended there. Complete joke. Anyway, we're gonna skip ahead. We got the Pokeflute, went down to Fuchsia City, all the same, and we're gonna go and fight Koga. The trainers before Koga are no problem, and Koga is also no problem. Just use Psychic. A single Psychic will take out the Coughings. Muck requires 2, but it doesn't do nearly enough damage. And the Wheezing, honestly, the strategy is just swap out Mr. Mime into literally anything else. It loves to use Self-Destruct, and there you go. Seriously, how did I not think of this before? This is just so much easier. Anyway, I'm gonna get Surf, and just like last time, I'm gonna go to Cinnabar Island now. Or I guess I should clarify, that is what I should do. I did go to Sylph Company and try to get past the rival, and I actually can't. This was the first time I was just not able to defeat the rival, and essentially it was a war of attrition. It's between his Pokemon being a little stronger, outspeeding me, and knowing some better moves. I just am at too low a level, and frankly, there is nowhere else to get experience points. You can't battle Sabrina until after you get through Sylph Company, which you need to beat the rival to do, and the only place left I can go is to Cinnabar Island. And the only person I can battle there is Blaine, and Blaine is a joke. Like, Blaine's AI is some of the worst I've ever seen, and I've done this fight like 5 times, because I just couldn't believe at what I thought was luck, but no, it's just like intentionally terrible. Blaine always seems to use the worst possible move, whether it be healing at full health or just using like the worst attacks. I don't know. Anyway, this is the winning fight. He sends out Growlithe. I use Psychic. I don't get a crit, but I get a special drop, which is even better than a crit. Uses his Super Potion. Another Psychic takes it out. Exact same thing with Ponyta, except the Ponyta doesn't faint and uses Fire Spin, which because of my high special does nothing, and as soon as it ends, there goes Ponyta. Now, Rapidash really shows you what Blaine is all about. I get the Potion on full health, critical hit Psychic, and then I get hit with a Stomp, which flinches and crits, so you'd think, oh, that's scary. Then gets a Tail Whip in before I take it out, so, oh no, maybe reset. Are you gonna beat the Arcanine? I don't know. Yeah, Arcanine's no problem. Special drop, Super Potion. It uses Ember after it misses with the Fire Blast. I mean, how could I not show this fight? It was just so ridiculous. But to be fair, just so you guys don't think, well, that was lucky. Well, yes, it was. But in my subsequent fight, and I'll show this very quickly, I just start off with a Reflect and a Light Screen, and the fight's a joke. I seriously have no issues. Nothing can really do much damage. So, if you want a consistent strategy and not being reckless because you're bored, there you go. But reckless because you're bored strats, I don't know, they're way more fun and make for a more interesting video. And come on, I had to make one of these fights challenging. I mean, they're just so easy. But thankfully, we're going to face the rival again, and this fight is somewhat challenging. I mean, at least compared to the rest of them. Now, before I face him, I'm actually going to delete Reflect, which is a TM in this game, so I can always teach it back if I need it. And I'm going to teach Toxic. This will help later on in the fight. Anyway, now I'm outspeeding the Pidgeot. I hit it with 2 Thunderbolts. It can hit you. It won't do very much damage. Not the problem here. Execute, funny enough, is a problem because it knows Stun Spore. And if it hits you with Stun Spore, it's a reset. But luckily in this fight, I got Poison Powder. That's fine. Not ideal. It's best if it just uses like Barrage or whatever, but I'll take a Poison Powder. Just keep spamming it with Psychic until it decides it doesn't feel like being in this fight anymore. Then Gyarados comes out, Thunderbolt by Gyarados. Now, Alakazam likes to spam Recover. That's why we have Toxic. It can just be really, really obnoxious to fight. With the Poison, I'm going to set up a Light Screen just to be safe. It's doing like no damage anyway. It only has not very effective attacks. And with a few turns and, you know, just spamming some more Psychics, there goes the Alakazam. Charizard, you don't want a critical hit Slash, but it doesn't like to use it too much. I got Rage, 2 Thunderbolts, and there's the fight. Pretty clean, not too many problems if you don't get a Stun Spore. Unfortunately, can't really control that because Execute just has the right type combination that I don't have a neutral move against it. Still, compared to the last run, this is insanely consistent. And I'm not even going to talk about the Giovanni fight. You just use Psychic a bunch of times. It's not challenging whatsoever. So let's skip ahead to Sabrina. Now, you have 2 options here. What I decide to do is, against the Kadabra and the Mr. Mime, I spam Thunderbolt. If you get a crit, they'll go down in 1 hit. You can also set up a Light Screen. Now, I should mention that in Generation 1, Reflect and Light Screen last for the entirety of the battle while that one Pokemon is out there. So, it only affects the one Pokemon that uses it, but it doesn't go away. So in that sense, it's incredibly overpowered, especially if you're only using a single Pokemon like I am. I feel like I should mention that because Gen 2 and beyond, it works differently where it's 5 turns and affects the entire party. Anyway, Thunderbolts against the first two are fine. Venomoth, a single Psychic. Alakazam, I'm going to go Toxic Light Screen and then spam Psychic. Why not Thunderbolt? Just safety, I guess. I mean, the Alakazam loves to use Recover, and dropping its special... Really, I probably should have used the Thunderbolt at some point, but it didn't matter, let's be honest. So, we're going to head to the last gym, Giovanni. You use Psychic a few times. There's really not much more to it. Dugtrio does outspeed you, so there's a risk of getting hit by it. I got a Sand Attack fail right on his 2 hits, so there is potential there for some problems, but I've done this fight 10 times, and every time it was really easy. So now, time to go to the Elite Four, but of course, we need to battle our rival once again. Strategy is nearly identical, except there's a Rhyhorn, which takes a single Psychic. I once again do the Toxic and Psychics with Alakazam. You can see how much damage it can do, so maybe I should have set up a light screen in retrospect. I also could have fainted to the Charizard if it decided to, attack me, but honestly, I wasn't overly worried and I was just going to use the Omanite to finish it off. I am pretty good on experience points, at least I think so, for the rest of the game, which is why I wasn't very worried. Anyway, let's talk about the Elite Four. They are really, really easy. Like, really easy. I'm sorry, I want a cool, exciting video, but you wanted better strats. These are better strats. So, literally, the strat is spam Thunderbolt. That's about it. You can set up a light screen if you want to. I did. But the only real risk is a critical hit. Everything pretty much takes 2 hits except for Jinx, which can take 3. You will get some critical hits in there because of your high speed stat, and if you remember, critical hit ratios in Gen 1 are based on your base speed, so I believe about 20% of my attacks will crit. Nothing really to report here. Against Bruno, you use Psychic. That is it. You win. Against Agatha, you use Psychic. You win. Seriously, it's so easy. I stopped healing between fights because I was just so bored and I wanted it to be interesting. And I did actually faint. I got hit with a Confuse Ray. I hit myself with Confusion. I actually lost to the final Gengar. And then I tried using Vaporeon. It didn't do too well. But Aerodactyl, I mean, I told you guys in the last video I wanted to give it a more proper farewell. Here you go. Aerodactyl takes out Agatha's Gengar. You would never see that in another run, so that was kind of cool, I guess, but yeah, not terribly exciting these battles are. And thus, against Lance, I decided not to use my many PP restoring items, and instead just decided to wing it. And so I used a single Thunderbolt against Gyarados, of course, that was it. Dragonair actually takes 2 Psychics, and I only have 3, which is my own fault. I got a crit, so it's all good. And Aerodactyl gets a crit too, but single Thunderbolt, bye-bye Aerodactyl. And then we get the Dragonite, and I wish I didn't use Toxic here, because even though the Dragonite does use Hyper Beam and takes out the Mr. Mime, I knew I would be able to take out the Dragonite because of a flaw in the AI, where against Ivysaur or any poison Pokemon, it will just spam Agility or Barrier. And so I've done this before. It's really funny. I knew this would work, but you didn't even really get to see it because in one turn the battle was over. But I promise you, it does work, and now we get to have Venusaur in the Hall of Fame, so that's cool. But anyway, I hate to be anticlimactic, but the rival fight is similarly as easy. Against the Pidgeot, the same strategy of 2 Thunderbolts is fine. Alakazam, Toxic, and then either use Thunderbolt or Psychic. I used both. Of course, don't forget to set up the light screen. That is important. Now, against the Rhydon, if you don't crit, it is a 2-hit KO, and you can do a little bit of damage, but I got the crit, so I didn't want to do this all again. I'm sorry, but it's not too much of a problem. Trust me, we could even use Venusaur or something if it really came down to it. But speaking of which, I wanted to try and get Aerodactyl one more moment and try and get it to gain a level for all the hard work it's done in these 2 videos. Unfortunately, it gets hit with the Hypnosis, and so it doesn't get to take out the Executor, and you can see how good its special is by how little damage my Psychics are doing. Not a problem. Hi Gyarados. Bye Gyarados. Hi Charizard. Bye Charizard. Hooray! No, but in seriousness, Gen 1 is pretty broken, and it is really cool to see how you can push this challenge so much further than I did the first time. Sure, the Venustar strategy, as I'll call it, was entertaining and used a lot of really novel moves, but it was inconsistent. It is kind of cool to see just how good you can make this. I'm sure there are even more ways to improve it, and if you guys have ideas, please let me know. Gen 1's just really easy. I mean, pretty much every Gen 1 game. I can't envision a single Gen 1 game that would be difficult in this challenge. I mean, you always get such great starters that are so good against the first gym. Now, if there were a game where that wasn't the case, well, I don't know how I would be able to do that. And if you'd like to see that, we are right now in like deficit. We wanted 10,000 likes to make this video. I wanted to make it so badly, I made it anyway, but we need to hit a like surplus. So I was gonna ask for 5. Let's get 16,000 on the 2 combined, okay? If we get 16 on the 2 combined, I'll show you guys how to do this in Pokemon Yellow version. And yes, it is possible. Really annoying, and nothing like this, but it is something I have also done. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the updated strategies. If you have any questions, please let me know. I genuinely enjoy reading your guys' comments, and it helps the algorithm, so that's cool. But that being said, I'm so glad everything has worked out, and I'm going to continue making videos, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.